Come along, children. Now we're going to have a little music.
Yo, what's up, guys? Welcome back to First Cut. This is our review of Elemental, Disney Pixar's new film that has been out in theaters for a minute. I'm here with RB3 in the house to talk about it. I know we're big Disney Pixar fans, so I know, RB3, that you really wanted to get to this movie. I got to go to an advanced screening a couple weeks back and reviewed it for Geeks of Color, but I want to get your thoughts on it, man. This is something that you saw a preview of at CinemaCon, but now that you finally saw the movie, what did you think of Elemental?
Yeah, man. Well, from that CinemaCon preview, I was really, I liked what I saw the CinemaCon preview. I thought visually it looked nice. The 3D looked cool. The fact, especially in Dolby 3D, but I was not feeling confident in the fact that of the story. The fact that I was like an immigration story, not the fact that because of the contents of the story, just because I know Disney and because I particularly have already watched Utopia, and that was the last movie where where they make visually interesting things like talking animals, and this one talking elements as a stand-in and a metaphor for race and analogy for society, things of that nature. I was really going to be upset if that was going to be a similar kind of situation on the Pixar side. But, thankfully did watch the movie this week a little bit later because I feel like just like the rest of America, the marketing just wasn't hitting me either. But the critical reception was good, and just honestly, people on the timeline saying it was good. And yeah, actually, I ended up enjoying it. I enjoyed it most because my problem with a movie like Zootopia is that they had a hero-villain complex, like a predator versus savage, kind of situation, talking about the more menacing type of animals. And if you're using that as a metaphor for black people, you could easily justify the racism both ways. Like if you're a not racist person, you could walk into Zootopia and be justified in your belief. But if you're a racist person, you could also watch Zootopia and be like, yeah, that movie got it right, because it's saying that these predators are naturally savage by nature. But thankfully, this movie doesn't have any sort of like natural kind of element. There's a little bit of that with the fire, the flame thing being like a little bit more destructive than anything else, but that's not really an inherent like problem for a lot of these things. Like they don't burn down anything particularly, like the story gets burnt up for a thing, but that's just the story that they're within. It's not like a catastrophic thing. And I think will also make this film better is the fact that there's no bad guy. I was really appreciating of the fact that there was no like cartoon bad guy to wait for at the end. It was really just a simple romance comedy between these two elements.
Yeah, that was interesting. I kind of want to hit on that right now. The fact that there is no villain. Did you expect that there would be a villain anytime during the movie? Maybe like a water villain who was doing that thing on purpose, who was breaking that dam on purpose?
There was part of me that thought there might be a villain, but, kind of halfway through, I didn't think there was. The closest I thought there was going to be to a villain was the gal lady who was like the lady who was like the boss of the department. But right, they humanized her very quickly early on in the beginning. So as soon as they kind of got that out the way, like, oh wow, this is kind of a nice little film. I didn't expect anything to happen beyond that. If there was some sort of twist, like, oh, the water room manipulating, that would have been kind of weird, and I think that would have took me out of it. But I like that they held firm to not villainizing any of these cultures, just making them a little bit different from each other.
How'd you feel about, a lot of people have been talking about the romance of it. How'd you feel about it as a rom-com kind of movie?
Yeah, it was a good rom-com, man. I forgot the names of the cast members already. But
Leah Lewis
Lee Lewis is the
from the
young
half
lady.
of it.
Oh, half of it. Right. Oh, right. We did review that movie too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he's really sweet. And the brother who played
Wade.
the water. Yeah, I forgot his name too. But
I forgot his name too. I can bring it up.
yeah, kind of interesting that they got a brother, a black man, to play that part, because if we're really, again, this movie's not meant to be taken as a one-on-one analogy, but if it was, you would almost think the Wade character is like a white guy, right? The way his hair is set up, the way.
Oh yeah, he's definitely. Yeah, he's a white coded character.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah,
or white presenting character, I guess.
Yeah, he's crying all the time, mad sensitive, which is funny, and it's so. I feel like that's just one of the funniest comedic things, like the fact that he's crying so much. Like anytime he's like, as soon as he pulled up to to their little firehouse thing, or to their little fireplace. He's like, I have to write you guys a ticket. And he's just like pouring tears down his face. That mug was hilarious. He was a really funny character. But yeah, the voice acting really did sell the romance the most, especially the chemistry between those two. It really made it feel like they were, romantically, like, fire and water can actually connect.
He's Mamoudou Athie.
Mamoudou
Uh,
Athie. Okay.
Mamoudou Athie. He was, you know where I recognize him from right away? He's great in that Netflix show that came out last year, Archive 81. He's great in that. That's a great show too, but
I've
I
never
think it
seen
got
that one.
canceled. Um, but yeah, that's where I recognize him. How'd you feel about, you talked about it a little bit, but I kind of want to dive deeper. How'd you feel about the allegorical elements in this movie? Pun intended.
I thought it was better done than the way it was in Zootopia. You know what I mean? I just kind of prefer these films just kind of stay away from it altogether. It's to some extent just because I don't know what's the best way. I don't know how to say it. The best way, but I just feel like there's not going to be a Disney corporate film that's going to really get directly to the issues the same kind of way that maybe an independent voice or something else is going to get to it. So, and granted, I think this is better than Zootopia because when you look at the list of directors for Zootopia, all respect to them, it's a bunch of white guys, and they're telling, and the cop is the protagonist, right? You can kind of tell that's from their perspective. That's what they want to see. Whereas with this film is directed from Peter Sohn. He did The Good Dinosaur and a couple of other Pixar films. And he's a good director. And I thought that was, you could tell it was coming from a lot more of a sensitive place, a lot more in the vein of like Everything Everywhere All at Once. That was like a loving acceptance of immigration and highlighting the importance of that community inside of whatever this world is. I don't even know if they like said it was a name. Element City, I think. Yeah.
Element
Inside of
City.
Element City. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like it was well handled for sure by the director. I know he's a Korean American director. He talked a little bit about how his background inspired inspired this movie and inspired a lot of this movie. Even though, like, obviously, if you wanted to, you can probably try and play, you know, guess what element is what coded or what race. You can play that game, but then again, it gets a little muddy because they do
Yeah.
a good job of like broadening it enough to the point where it could be Asian, it could
Yeah.
be Middle Eastern, it
Yeah.
could be Indian Asian, South Asian, it could be like a lot of different types of ways to see the fire people, and then the water people. Again, it's seemingly the majority. It's seemingly white people, and it's seemingly people who maybe don't have, I don't know, enough spice because they're water.
All right.
Uh, but at the same time, they do a good job of balancing it and making it more just like in world. In world meaning it's more about the setting that they're in, which is their elements and how these elements mesh and match. Even though there's still discrimination within the fire people,
Yeah.
for the fire people or against them, is mainly what you see. So
I was gonna ask you from obviously you speak a lot about Latinx representation on film. Do you kind of see a little bit of that allegory with the fire people as well?
oh, you could
Or
totally see it for sure. I mean, you could totally see it in the sense of like how universal of a story immigration can be, right? Where I've seen a lot of Korean films over the past few years talking about this. Minari, for example, is a perfect example of like that's a culture and that's a people and that's a very specific story that hits every corner that shouldn't fit me because it has nothing to do with being Latino. And yet I felt represented in every single aspect of the film because of every single thing that's presented there can be, you know, placed onto a Latino immigrant story with learning the language, father working the farm. That's very common within Latinos. So I can see a lot of crossover, not necessarily because it's specifically coded that way, but because it is such a universal feeling. That's what I got also from past lives. We're going to talk about that later on. But that kind of feeling is represented in this movie. But if you had to like specify and stuff, I think it's much more Eastern coded, if that makes sense. But I can still feel the immigrant story. The immigrant story to me again is such a universal story. So yeah, for sure, man.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it's definitely funny because yeah, I definitely picked up on all forms of immigration for it. It is interesting for like the actual geography of Element City because of course it's kind of inspired by New York, Ellis Island coming into that side of New York. I can also kind of see bits of LA in this interpretation too, particularly how the community is pretty much segregated by the highway, right? Like how a highway divides the rich and the poor, south side, north side of the highway is the more rich, affluent area. South side is more, um, you can even tell like it was more fire and earth people on the lower side, and there was more air and water people like on the north side of the city. So that's kind of like the part that really stood out for me. I definitely was getting a little bit, just seeing again. This is maybe me reading way too deep into a kids movie, but the whole idea of the angry shop owner getting mad at the little water kid to the extent of like getting so mad to like kicking them out and like discriminating against them. That felt a little bit, if you know the history of LA and you know how a lot of times, and I know it's maybe not the best to say, but a lot of times Asian, or sometimes liquor store owners would give black kids a hard time in the 90s and 2000s. So it's like that kind of felt a little bit like, oh man, I hope that's not coming from like a real place too or something. You know what I mean? But they got over that pretty quickly. But yeah, it was a good it was good that they set up those dynamics because it makes the payoff between the characters between Wade and Fire
Ember.
Girl.
Ember.
Yeah, Ember. Yeah, it makes them getting together even more challenging. Like it makes their cultures so much more divided that it just doesn't seem compatible at all. But it does. It works
I
out.
feel like what worked too is the main character, Ember. I feel like she just held the movie together really well, and she was very relatable in a sense. Obviously, the immigrant aspect as well, but also just in a personality aspect where she does get tired of people quickly
Yeah.
and she does have a temper. I felt that.
uh,
But I just in general, I feel like her character was really well explored and dived into, where they gave you enough setup to a point where they can make a very simple Pixar Disney movie where it's like, I have this guy, but I want to be a shop owner, and my boyfriend who likes me is a water guy, so I can't be with him. That's a simple enough premise to be Disney. But then they get a tiny bit deeper, which it made the movie so much better, which is I actually don't want to be the shop owner and I want to make my own life and make my own dreams and go out into the world, which is even way better than would have been a simple story of like, this is what I want, this is what's stopping me, and now it's this is what I want, but I actually don't want that. I want something else, and I want this. I want both, which is a lot more profound in what I found in the movie for sure.
yeah, that was nice. It definitely made it for a nice, no pun intended, a nice added element uh, of suspense and a nice extra conflict because it does make that push and pull a lot more relatable. She's getting offered that I don't want to get like full spoiler, but it's not really. People probably already seen it by the time they're watching this review. But she gets an offer for a job in a big city, which is much more appealing to her. But she has to grapple between the taking over family business. I think that's the struggle. Like you said, it's very relatable across all cultures, across immigrant cultures, but even across like black cultures. Like that's something that I've seen. Local business like local donut shops or stores. With their kids are like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to take this over. But it's that struggle and that going back and forth. It was really nicely handled. And I thought they found mature ways to address adult subjects, but also keep it good for kids. Like I saw it with a bunch of kids in the theater that I was with, and I was surprised at how much they were laughing at a lot of the stuff too. It wasn't like they were knocking over their seats like some other animated films, but they still caught on to the story, and I think they were pretty engaged too. So keeping kids engaged during a rom com, that's pretty nice.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like if I have any closing thoughts, I would be like, I would say that Leah Lewis to me is really good. Like she's a damn good actress in general, and she really shined in this role to the point where at the end of the movie, I kind of like going into animated movies not knowing who the voice actor is.
Yeah.
And by the end of the movie, when I look it up who it is, it's like, oh, damn, this is really cool. Or where they didn't announce it, they might have said it at the end of the credits too. I might have recognized her then. But either way, I felt like she killed it. And I feel like overall the movie is. I enjoyed it. I really did. I feel like maybe it might have been a little too much rom com for me, for my taste. That's not exactly my brand, but at the same time, I can recognize the qualities of the film and what they do good inside the movies. So, any final thoughts, RB3?
Yeah, nah, it's good. It's a good Pixar movie. It's serviceable and a better. I feel like just people have been talking about Pixar's on its downtrodden recently. I feel like between this is definitely more on the turning red and the soul side of the quality equation than on the Luca's or the Lightyear side. Like I feel like this is much better. It's on the more higher tier of Pixar than the more recent like lower tier ones that we got like Lightyear. It's definitely better than Lightyear.
For sure. Either way, guys, those are our thoughts on Elemental. Let us know what is your thoughts in the comments down below. What is your favorite part of the movie? Did you enjoy it as much as we did? Did you feel like where does it rank in the Pixar echelon of films? But either way, guys, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Squad Leader Race. It's RB3.
You follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Director RB3.
Either way, guys, for the First Cut crew, we're going to be peacing out. So peace, deuces.
Remain.